Hello, everyone. I'm Ed Densel, and I host Unfound, and I run this YouTube channel. I realize you don't want to give a thumbs up to the following video until you watch it. You know what? That's totally understandable. I can appreciate that. But what you can do right now is subscribe to this channel. The button is right there. Thanks. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April 2022 edition of Unfound Now. I am, of course, Unfound's host, Ed Densel. On this episode of Unfound Now, we will be covering the disappearance of Jordan Simeon, who disappeared from Little Rock, Arkansas on March 6th of 2022. If you are new to Unfound Now, let's say you are finding this video for the first time, this monthly series started during the summer of 2020. I started it because I wanted the opportunity to cover new disappearances, recent disappearances within the last few months of whenever an episode would air. That is something we do not do on the regular Friday podcast. And I was thinking about this for two major reasons. Number one, for publicity. Any disappearance that is still unsolved out there can benefit from any sort of publicity. Whether it's a few hundred views or many thousands of views, it can benefit. So, of course, started this series with that in mind. Also, though, here at Unfound, we are all about education. And so I use these disappearances, these recent disappearances that are unsolved, to illustrate the bigger picture about missing persons cases in the United States. So when I've had an episode, when I've done an episode like this one, and like I've said, this has to be about episode number 20 now of this series. Every time I come to this microphone, I have educational points that I want to make. And so these are the 3 points that I will be illustrating later in this video after we go through looking at the map of where Jordan was when he disappeared and some things going on in his life, a little bit about him, and everything that has transpired since the middle of March. But those 3 educational points are: disappearances are about people first. Number 2, victims also don't tell the truth. And number 3, always default to simplicity. So now I'm going to be going to the map. You will not see me. You will just see the map. I'll be doing showing you the route that he was taking. He was driving from Fargo, North Dakota to New Orleans. I'm going to show you that route, show you approximately where his car was found, tell you a little bit about him, the phone conversations that he had, and then I will come back and we will go into those 3 educational points a little deeper. So I'll be back in a moment, but you're going to hear me right now. Okay, let's take a look at this map of this route between Fargo, North Dakota, and New Orleans that Jordan took when going from one place to the other. Now, it should be noted that, of course, his car was found outside of Little Rock, which is right there. But if you were to just put this map into Google or maybe even Waze or any other sort of mapping or routing program, this route from Fargo to New Orleans is not the quickest or maybe most efficient going through Little Rock. And I will take Little Rock out of the calculation here, and you will see what I mean. See how the map changed. It was going down this way, and then what Google says, it's quicker and shorter to go down this way. Of course, Little Rock's over here somewhere. So I guess we have to think about that. And allow me just to, for a moment, type in Little Rock one more time so we can use the proper route there. But I just wanted to show you that the way he went from Fargo, if he was planning to get to New Orleans, going through Little Rock, not the most efficient, not crazy longer or crazy in time longer or in mileage longer, but It's just not the shortest way. I don't know if you knew that or not. But he leaves on March 5th. And it was on the 6th when seemingly the problems started. He was talking to his friend. I'm going to say their name is Adonia, Adonia. She was in New Orleans waiting for him. They knew each other from Minnesota. She had moved down to New Orleans in 2020, and he was going to move down there and live with her. My understanding is that she is a bit older. She was not his girlfriend or anything. It sounds like they were just friends. So allow me to now zoom in here. And it sounds to me the way Adonia said it is that they were keeping in contact pretty much pretty regularly as he left Fargo to get down to this area. Now, the area that we want to concentrate in on now is right up here, right in this direction, and right in that area, and I'm going to change this over to a regular satellite view. Where his car was eventually found was right in this stretch, right in here on the 40 headed south. And around 4:30 on March 6th, remember that he left the day before on March 5th from Fargo. He called Adonia at about 4:30 p.m. to say that his car broke down and said that he had already called roadside assistance and the truck was arriving right around the time when the two of them were talking. Now, in the articles that I've read, it says they were actually FaceTiming, so I guess there might be a video of this. Maybe does FaceTime automatically record calls in video? I don't know. But the understanding was that it was FaceTimed, so I think we have to keep that in mind. I think that's maybe an important part of this. It'd be nice maybe if Adonia in future interviews might be a little more descriptive regarding that. But either way, it's unclear if he actually said the actual location. I don't know when he was talking to her. Did he say, well, you know, I'm kind of on the outskirts of Little Rock, or I'm south of this? I'm not sure if he knew where he was. Obviously, he knew he was on the 40 and he was getting near a city. I'm sure he was looking at the road maps or the road signs. But I'm not sure if he was as exact as to say, well, I'm just so many miles out of Little Rock and everything. And it's not even clear if he even knew what happened to his car. Well, as the two were talking, they came up with a plan, or maybe it seems more like Adonia came up with a plan, that she gave Jordan the idea that he should go to the nearest bus stop, Greyhound bus, get a ticket for a bus to take it from Little Rock eventually to New Orleans, and then he could meet up with her and they would drive back to Little Rock, take care of whatever problem the car was having, if it could even be fixed, and then they could get all his stuff and then he could drive back down. Just, you know, who knew maybe the thinking was, who knows how long it would take to get this car fixed, and once again, maybe the vehicle wouldn't have been fixed at all. But so Adonia sent him some money through Venmo, and so they talked about this. And the problem was that, you know, I don't know, it's very unclear, and there's a few articles, I'm just going by what I would call the most descriptive article, is that either she had arranged for him to go to a motel somewhere, or he said he was going to a specific motel. But the problem starts when she calls that motel or hotel and Jordan's not there. And in fact, there's nobody on the register by his name. And so when that occurred and she couldn't reach him, she ended up calling the Arkansas State Police that night, once again on March 6th. And they ended up finding his vehicle right here, as I've explained it before. Right on this highway in this area. This is the Route 430 right here, just north of the 430. Kind of it branches off from the regular 40. He wasn't there. And he, of course, remember, he said that a tow truck was showing up there at 4:30. Then why was his car still there that night? The next day, a report was filed, and automatically there were jurisdictional issues, which shouldn't surprise anybody. Of course, the car has a North Dakota plate on it, but it's in Arkansas, and there was quickly a back and forth between the two states about who's going to be responsible for this. As I've talked about many times over and over, police departments it seems like they want to play hot potato. Arkansas doesn't want it. North Dakota, you take it. North Dakota doesn't want it. It's in your state. The car's down there. You take it. This is not just unique to Jordan's disappearance. I've covered this many, many times in many of Unfound's disappearances. So there was a jurisdictional issue. In addition, what Adonia ended up figuring out or finding out through a lot of work on her part is that, remember, he was going to be allegedly getting a bus wherever Greyhound bus location was in this area. And I guess she bought him a ticket. He never showed up to pick up the ticket either. So eventually, when the vehicle did really get towed, for sure, what the driver said is that, yes, the car was here right in the middle of the screen, but the keys were on the vehicle, not in the vehicle. All of Jordan's valuables were inside. He had an Xbox or some other things. A lot of valuable things inside the car, not taken. But something strange is when they did tow it to a local garage for them to take a look at it, and I have to say I wasn't able to find anything. Was there anything actually wrong with the car for it to have broken down? But what they did find is that the catalytic converter on it was missing. And the thinking, and this will be one of the points I make in one of the educational items I have for this video, is somebody came along after the vehicle was left by itself. Somebody came along and just took it right off the vehicle. I'm sure there will be some other people that might think maybe Jordan was there when somebody pulled up and wanted to take the catalytic converter, and those people took him too. I will get to that later in this video. But this is where the car was towed from, was where Jordan says he was on March 6th when he was talking to Adonia. So that's the map part of this video, but I do want you to notice one thing. Not to foreshadow, but I can't help it. Do notice that this highway is very close here to the Arkansas River, and I will talk about that a little later. I'm going to talk a little bit about the times and some things that I discovered. So I'll go back to you seeing me on the video, and we will complete this episode of Unfound now. And before I get into those 3 educational points, I would like you to consider becoming a member of this channel. You'll see this little join button down in this area somewhere. If you click on that, you'll discover what you get for the low price of 10 cents a day. What are some of those items? You will get the Friday episodes a day early. And not only are they early, but they will be the video form of the episode. So you will get to see me. You will get to see the guest for that week. You also get these Unfound Now episodes. This one, for example, will be coming out a week early for all members. The public will have to wait a week sometime into May before they get to view it. I also have started an update series where every day I come to this microphone and this camera, and I tell the members what is going on with Unfound for that day. What am I doing? Who am I talking to? What am I writing about? What I'm reading? Just to kind of give a behind the scenes of how a true crime podcast is put together. And I really enjoy doing it. doing that, and I've been doing that daily since February. So those are just a few of the items that you would get from becoming a member of this YouTube channel. Once again, the join button is right down there. If you don't see it, if you have an iPad or an iPhone, you may have to go to a regular computer to see that join button. I understand on certain Mac devices that join button isn't shown for some reason. I don't know why. But I would, really, I think you'll enjoy it. I would appreciate it if you consider it for, once again, the low price of 10 cents a day. Okay, let's go to those educational points. I do not do this off the top of my head. I have some notes off to my left. Maybe that seems like you're right. However, I don't know if this is the mirror image I forget when it comes out or not. But I'm going to go back to those educational points using Jordan's disappearance as the template for this. I'm going to use these educational points, talk about his disappearance, but then also talk about some of the disappearances we've covered on Unfound over the last 5.5 years. We've covered about 250 disappearances now. Give you some examples from those as well. All right, number one educational point. Disappearances are about people first. Been doing this for 5.5 years, and what I see, and I was there at one time too, so caught up in the dates, locations, and those are certainly important. I'm not saying they aren't. But there is a reason that if you listen to an Unfound episode, that we don't even start to talk about the actual day of the disappearance, whatever was going on that day for that person who went missing, until maybe an hour into my interview with the guest for that episode. It's a little different than I think the way other podcasts do it or other hosts do it. But the reason is that at some point in the last 5.5 years, I figured out that disappearances are really first, like I said, about the people. What was going on in that person's life? The people around that person, the person himself or herself. Was that person having problems, mental issues, addictions, in a bad relationship? Those items are what eventually cause disappearances. And what you learn is that the disappearance, although it happens at a specific point, January 1st, 2023 at 1 a.m. or whenever it is, it's really a combination of things building, maybe for years, that finally all come together on that date. And it doesn't matter if it turns out to be a suicide or an accident or somebody walking off or a murder. It doesn't matter. All of these disappearances are the combination of a lot of factors building up over time. So looking at Jordan's disappearance, I think it's very easy to see that it wouldn't be, and I don't do really any theorizing on these Unfound Now episodes. I'll be talking a little bit about that at the end, and I don't do that in the regular episodes either. But knowing that, we can then look at Jordan and reading articles about him, you find out kind of had a lot of big question marks in his life. What was he doing with his life at 25 years old? Making a big move from Fargo to New Orleans. I know a little bit about what that's about. When I was 27, I moved from Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh area, to Las Vegas. It can be nerve-wracking. You really wonder if you're doing the right thing. I even can say that when I moved to Las Vegas, there was at least a few points in that first year when I thought about moving back to Pennsylvania. I'm glad I didn't. Those 13 and a half years in Las Vegas ended up being fantastic. But moving under any circumstances, even if you're moving to a better job, better paying job, moving to the ocean or whatever else, there's a lot of stress that goes on with that. In addition, we know that Jordan had this disease called Huntington's disease that I'm no doctor, but in reading about it, it seems to be a combination of a lot of bad diseases out there. Combination of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. It doesn't all hit at one time like those diseases. It seems it starts very gradually getting worse and worse and worse. And it seems, if we are to believe it, that already at the age of 25 that Jordan might have been seeing these signs that this was happening to him. I don't know if any doctor since March has come out and said that. Maybe he knew and was telling people, but I don't know if there's drugs to slow it down. But that, of course, would weigh very heavily on his mind as well. To me, you look at a disappearance, these are usually the types of issues that you want to concentrate on. Now, of course, most people, probably you get these diseases, this particular disease, and are moving, don't disappear. But still, these are huge factors, just as big a factor as him ending up near Little Rock on March 6th, just like a month and a half ago. In fact, as I write in my notes here, looking off to my left, what I wrote here is most disappearances cannot be understood without knowing the person. This is a very interesting point that you take, if you just call the person Jane Doe and you don't know anything about her, then what if she was on that highway and her car breaks down? It just really doesn't tell you much. Okay, she was there and she was talking to a friend and then she wasn't there. But then, once again, we start finding out these other issues and maybe a much clearer picture starts to form. And that's why I'm saying that as much as we get caught up in locations and dates and phone calls and pings and everything, no disappearance can be totally understood without really knowing that person. Now, as far as disappearances we've covered on Unfound, where mental health, physical health, the environment that the person was in, Alzheimer's, dementia, we've talked about all of these items over these 250 disappearances that we've covered on Unfound. And some of those examples are David Schrader, who disappeared from Wisconsin. It turned out that after he went missing, that his family found a bunch of beer bottles, beer cans, hard liquor bottles that he was hiding around the house. He had been a drinker many years before he went missing, but it seems very close to his disappearance date that he started drinking again. And knowing that certainly puts his disappearance into focus. I don't have time to go into the particulars. If you are unfamiliar with that disappearance, please go to iTunes, Spotify, your podcast platform, and find the David Schrader disappearance. And I would say that for any of these. David Hardy Jr., he disappeared. He was an older gentleman who had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and unfortunately his family never took his car keys away from him. And he was just driving around, and it seems in his disappearance he got lost, and this was not the first time that happened. Renee LaManna, she had struggled with mental health problems her adult life. Her sister was trying to take care of her, and Renee was in a house in Ocean City, New Jersey, ran off. Her sister ran after her, did not find her. That's a disappearance that's almost 30 years old, still unsolved. But once again, if you just hear woman runs off on this particular date at this particular time, it doesn't tell you much. But then you learn a little bit more about her history of mental illness. It certainly brings everything into focus. Everything was a culmination up to that point that she decided to run off. And then the last one I want to mention is Patrick Beavers from Idaho, who many years ago, he even left a note behind. I wouldn't say it was a suicide note, but it was kind of like, well, I am out of here. And if you listen to that episode, you'll also hear that this was the culmination of a lot of things that have been building up over time. It very well may be that he moved somewhere else, changed his name, and is alive to this day. Maybe not as well. Maybe he did commit suicide, but it certainly was not a suicide note. So once again, disappearances are about people first. You have to get to know these people to really understand all of the other stuff. So keep that in mind, especially with Jordan's disappearance. Number 2, victims also don't tell the truth. Now, if you're watching this video, I'm guessing you've maybe listened to some true crime podcasts. Hopefully, if you've listened to ours, Unfound, maybe at least a few episodes. But you know, so much is made about how suspects lie, because a lot of these disappearances do have foul play. There's no denying that. People say they were in one place when they were somewhere else. We even can find friends of missing people who you don't necessarily think had anything to do with a disappearance, but their stories don't quite make sense for some reason. And we all get so caught up in all these people, they're all lying. Here's this good person who went missing, and all these people are lying. Well, I'm here to tell you, missing people lie as well. And, of course, this is important in Jordan's disappearance because he told this woman who was waiting for him in New Orleans that he was at his car and the truck was there and he was getting towed. We now know that that's not true because the Arkansas State Police found the car on the side of the road, and then some other truck eventually came to tow it away. So he was certainly lying about that. He lied about the truck. Also, as much as I tried to find information about what the actual condition of his car was, I believe it was a Kia Soul, one of these like little boxy vehicles. They're kind of cute, like SUVs, I guess you might call them. He said it broke down. I don't think there's any proof of that. Maybe he did run out of gas or something, but mechanically, I've not read anything that says that it actually broke down, despite him telling this woman who was a friend of his that it had broke down. Yes, the catalytic converter was gone from it, but that would, and I'll get into that, but that would not affect the running of the car, and especially since it is accepted that he left North Dakota and drove directly to the point at which the car was found. When would somebody have had time to cut that catalytic converter out on the way from North Dakota to there? And I've not read anything to say that Jordan had the mechanical know-how to do that. So that would not have affected the mechanical condition of the car, so you can't even say that. What I'm saying is that in any disappearance, although it very well may end up being the case that the missing person was telling the truth, whatever the person said, whether they said they were going out for coffee and would be right back, they were around friends, or they were texting, or whatever else, you shouldn't always take that as being 100%. Okay, you should never do that. It eventually may be proven that those statements are true, and that's great. But for you, the public, missing people lie for all sorts of reasons. Now, we could go into it. They're lying because they're going to commit suicide and they don't want anybody to know. They're lying because they're on drugs, they're high, and they really don't know what they're saying. Certainly can happen. Also, they could be lying because somebody is there forcing them to say something that's not true. That happens as well. In addition, this is the fourth reason, although it's not necessarily them talking, somebody could be using their phone, texting or messenger where you can't see the person, can't hear the person, and pretending to be that missing person. And of course, then those would be lies as well, because the person, it's not John Smith using his phone, it's Jane Doe using his phone. And I think it's certainly applicable to Jordan's disappearance that he was not telling the truth. He just wasn't. So any statement must be researched, examined, and I see it on Web Sleuths. I go there once in a while, other places, that people just take what missing people say for granted as being the truth. I'm here to tell you, after 250 disappearances, a lot of missing people before they go missing are not telling the truth for whatever reason. And so I'm once again going to illustrate some examples from Unfound's catalog of disappearances. Brenda Sika, disappearance we covered last year. The way she lied is on her Facebook page. She led people to believe, she she posted a picture and led people to believe that she was in this town at a certain time, right before her disappearance, like days before her disappearance. And what I was able to find out by looking at that picture is that was a dated picture. In fact, a building that was in the picture had changed. It didn't look like that at the time of her disappearance. In fact, it hadn't looked like that for years, like 5 years before that. So that picture was actually 5 years old, but she was posting it as if telling people, yeah, this is where I am. Well, she couldn't have been there because the building looked different in the year she disappeared. So that's a very good example. Jesse Foster, who went missing in Las Vegas. I just happened to live in Las Vegas when this happened. She was telling her family that everything was fine. And in fact, she went back to Canada, was around her family by herself, and not once did she ever say that she was a prostitute in Las Vegas. She had been forced into this. She had had her jaw broken, and that she had been threatened, and that she had basically she was being sex trafficked. She was there in Canada by herself with her family, never told them any of that. They never even knew any of that until she disappeared. Craig Freer, he had been telling his family, his parents, that he was going to work at this supermarket. They eventually found out that he'd been lying about that. He'd either quit or he'd been fired, and he'd been going to see his friends. And on the day that he went missing is when his family found out that he had been lying this whole time. So he was lying. Rodney Kaiser, he told everybody he was going to be, he was in Virginia. He was going to see his brother on the total other side of Virginia. And instead, his truck was found right down the street from where he lived. And his brother said, I had no idea. He didn't say anything to me about coming to see me, hours and hours away. And then Ashley Kohler, once again, kind of like Jesse Foster, in that she was a call girl in California. And she was telling her mother that everything was fine, her life was going great. And that was a total lie. And then she went missing. So missing people lie too, not just suspects or suspicious friends or any people like that. The missing people lie too for all sorts of reasons. And number 3, the educational point for this episode of Unfound Now, covering the disappearance of Jordan Simeon. The point is, number 3, always default to simplicity. Too often I see people who take an interest in disappearances, and I thank you all for taking an interest in these disappearances. I deeply appreciate it. As a person who does this for a living, I deeply appreciate that. And I'm sure the families do too. But what I would urge you to do is not always automatically jump to the most intricate, conspiracy-laden, complicated theory for a disappearance, because I think what we've shown over the first 5.5 years of Unfound is when disappearances are solved, they're usually pretty straightforward. It's not the solutions, what happened, are not that intricate at all. And it doesn't matter if it was a suicide, an accident, or a murder. They're usually pretty straightforward. And the reason this comes up in Jordan's is because I know there are going to be people who look at his disappearance and think, well, he said the tow truck driver showed up and but the car was still there. Did they get in a fight? And did the tow truck driver do something to Jordan and take him away? Or did somebody else pull up? Did the tow truck driver show up and then Jordan didn't have the money or something, so that tow truck driver drove away, and then somebody else showed up and something happened, and in the process these people stole that catalytic converter. And if you're not familiar with this, the reason catalytic converters are being stolen these days is because of the elements in it. What is it? It's not cadmium. It's platinum, other metals that are very expensive. You can sell these catalytic converters on the black market, get a nice buck for them. It's becoming very, very common. I would urge all of you to be very careful for those of you who park your cars on the street. But I can see those theories already being crafted out there regarding Jordan's disappearance. I'm not saying that didn't happen. Certainly possible. I'm always confused why people automatically default to that when there's no proof of that. Of course, none of these theories that I just mentioned defy the laws of physics. They are all possible. But they're also fairly complicated. And so you should always consider that, always keep that in mind when coming up with your own theory. Rarely is the most complicated, intricate, controversial theory the answer to these disappearances that are eventually solved. Very, very, very rarely. So when you start thinking about Jordan's, I'm not saying he didn't get picked up by the wrong person. Now, something I would ask is that, are there any incidents of motorists getting stuck on the side of the road and being murdered or being kidnapped? Tried to take a little short look into that. I couldn't find anything. I would be more open to that idea if somebody could show me there was a series of incidents over 2020, 2021 into 2022 where stranded motorists were kidnapped or carjacked, attacked, their cars stolen. Then we could look at that and take it very, very seriously. I didn't find anything like that for the Little Rock area over that time. So some examples from Unfound's own history of solved disappearances, or kind of solved. Esther Westenbarger. Now, I will admit, this was one from early in my career as a host. I thought that her brother had murdered her. He's a very shady guy. He continues to be a very shady guy. He was with her on the night she and he were out with friends in Kokomo, Indiana. But there was video of her getting into her car by herself and leaving. But I still thought, did he track her down? You know, she had just come into some money. She had retired. She was doing pretty well. She was driving a Cadillac that also went missing with her. That's the theory that I defaulted to. 10 years later, we find out that her car is found in a retention pond near her house. It seems she blew a stop sign as she was driving home, went right into this pond, and drowned in her car. And she and her car were found totally by accident. They looked at the car. It was in drive. The key was on. She had her seatbelt on. She just drove all by herself into this retention pond. Not common type of disappearance, but it certainly happens. But it's certainly really straightforward, especially considering that she was drinking at the time. And she might have been drinking and driving, blew that stop sign. Happens all the time. Now, we're just got to be lucky she didn't kill anybody besides herself. So, Crystal Morrison. This is also one where I thought foul play was involved, and it wasn't. You can look that on. I'm not going to get into the circumstances. But if you're not familiar with that disappearance, please go back to 2017, those episodes from 2017, and find her disappearance. She called for a ride. When the ride showed up, she wasn't there. She ended up being found in some woods on private property about a mile away, and the decision was that she died just due to the elements. Noah Davis, this is another one, a lot of conspiracy theories regarding his disappearance. He was eventually found not too far away from where he was last seen. He was allegedly walking home, but he wasn't an addict. He'd just done drugs, and the belief is that he had an overdose while walking home. But at the time when he went missing, just some of the craziest stories I've ever heard in doing this program, doing Unfound, the regular podcast, surrounded his disappearance. And I'm here to tell you, none of those were true. Maybe a non-unfound disappearance that is also a very good example of people not defaulting to simplicity. And that was Brandon Lawson. Disappearance that went unsolved for a very long time. A lot of people thought the local police are involved, that somebody came along and picked him up and killed him, and there was this 911 call, and he was rambling on. He said people were after him, something like that. He was found recently, kind of like Crystal Morrison's disappearance, on private land, wasn't buried. And the reason they missed them all these years is because those particular people who owned the land would not allow searchers on until recently. They go on that property not too far from where Brandon's truck was found, and there he was. These kinds of disappearances also show sometimes the only person who knows what happened in a disappearance is the missing person himself or herself. All these people who say, well, someone knows something, and when they say that, they're meaning like the public or a suspect or something. Sometimes the only person who knows what happened in a disappearance is the missing person. Got to keep that in mind. And that's why I urge all of the listeners of Unfound, really take a hard look at the most simple answer first. Do not default to the complex. Default to the simple, the easy way to explain a disappearance, and most often that is going to be the answer. So how does this then, putting that all together, what does this mean for Jordan Simeon's disappearance? Well, I'm bothered, of course, by the fact that he was lying. He lied about his car, the tow truck being there and his car breaking down. I do not believe those things to be true. What you also notice, and this goes back to the video that I showed, the map video earlier in this episode, that you look at that, if you go back to that, you'll see that where his car was found, it just happened to be kind of the closest point on that highway to the Arkansas River. Could be a total coincidence. Could be he didn't even know the river was there. But we can't ignore that. And that whole trip coming down from the north to the south, his car just happens to break down, quote unquote break down, not far from this river. What I also think is noteworthy is the time of this call at 4:30 p.m. I looked it up. Sunset in Little Rock, Arkansas on March 6, 2022 was 6:10 p.m. And what I did was I did a Google map from approximately where the car was to the river. And don't you know that if he had started walking right after that call he made with that friend at 4:30, if he started walking toward that river, he would have gotten to the river right around dark. This is something that I think if his family is watching this, this is what they should be thinking about. I of course hope that he is found tonight, tomorrow at the very least, alive and well. But doing this, I always try to be very honest with my guests. These are things you have to consider. Okay? We know that he lied. We know he was going through some things. We know that this disease might have been really kicking in. He was very afraid of that. He was under a lot of stress moving from one place to the other. Doesn't go to the hotel. Doesn't get the bus ticket. It all kind of paints a picture. So, but as facts change, theories change, and if some fact comes out there that says that some person in Arkansas ended up with something that Jordan owned, that he would have had on him, then I guess we have to start looking at foul play theories. But that is not what I would call the most direct, the simplest, most easy to explain answer regarding his disappearance. If Jordan's family wants to contact me, of course, they can email me at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. I'd be more than happy to talk to them off the record, give them some pointers, some ideas, some insight. In addition to what I've said here, I'll talk to any family at any time. So that is this episode of Unfound Now for April of 2022, covering the disappearance of Jordan Simeon. Thanks for watching.